Hello! Thank you everyone for coming out tonight to the next of our fall sustainability series, Solar and Home Energy Plans. I'm Julian. I'm one of the Adult Services Librarians here at the Newton Free Library. And we're thrilled to have Green Newton, Judy Lehrer-Jacobs, the Executive Director, and then our presenters from right to left, we have from Revision Energy, Cal Monroe, who co-founded his own PV installation company in 2011. He later joined Sunbelt Solar and now Revision Energy, an employee-owned B Corp, as a system design specialist. And then Derek Brain, after a career in woodworking, product design, and production design, Derek earned a master's in sustainability and environmental management and began working in the solar industry. Before joining Revision, he worked on solar projects large and small for homeowners in Massachusetts, as well as large institutional clients like Harvard. And then from Byggmeister Design/Build, we have Rachel White, who's the CEO of the company, a 41-year-old residential remodeling company that strives to serve as an exemplary steward of homes and to prepare them to meet the challenges of the 21st century. Rachel also serves on the board of directors of the Northeast Sustainable Energy Association and is a member of Newton's Citizens Commission on Energy. Thank you all.
Thank you, Julian. And I'd like to thank the library for co-sponsoring this series of events on sustainability. I'm glad that you came to this one, and each month we'll have a different one. So in November is chocolate and induction cooking. So you won't want to miss that. That's November 13th. And then we have one on electric vehicles on December 11th. And I want to thank all of you for coming out on a Wednesday night to learn more about sustainability. And since I quizzed you as you came in, I know that most of you already know Green Newton, but I will say that we are a member-supported nonprofit that works with the Newton residents, businesses, and the city to inspire actions that protect the environment and the climate. And one of the efforts that we have is to promote renewable energy. And this series fits right in with that. And another, in addition to the events that I already mentioned, we also have a community event coming up on November 13th, where you can learn all about network geothermal, which is a very efficient form of renewable energy and kind of cutting edge, groundbreaking, we like to say. So I hope that you come on November 13th for that. And if you sign up for our e-news, you'll get a notice probably in the next week or two. And I think now we can start. I really want to thank all our presenters today. And I think you'll get a really good sense of the basics of solar and thinking about how you can plan your all of your energy projects, including solar. So, Derek?
Yeah, can we put
Oh,
on
you
this?
actually can use that one.
Well,
No?
yeah, we're going to switch off, so.
Oh, okay.
Hi, can everyone hear me okay?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, hi. I'm Derek Brain from Revision Energy. We'll try to do, fairly, high-level talk about solar and hopefully leave time for any questions you might have. So just wanted to tell you a little bit about our company and a little bit about solar in Massachusetts. I'm Derek. I'm a PV sales and design consultant, primarily working in new construction and major renovations. I've been in the solar industry for 13 years, grew up next door in Needham, and been with Sunbug and Revision for about 2 years.
Hello? Yeah, oh great, this is working. My name is Cal Monroe, and I'm also a solar design and also now heat pumps as well. I'm just general electrification geek. 13-year solar veteran. I actually started an installation company of my own. I tried my hand in what we call the solar coaster, which is it's a very exciting and busy field. There's a graveyard of companies But I wanted to add my shoulder to the lean to make the solar industry be in any form a stable, existent industry. And I think in that respect, I've largely succeeded. And I'm quite happy to have found Sunbug Solar and now Revision as a genuine employee-owned company. I've been with Sunbug for 2 years. It's just been a terrific experience. I also hail from relatively close by in Acton. I grew up in the Metro West area. And my mother was from Brookline, so just one town over. So that's me in a nutshell.
So Revision started about 21 years ago up in Maine. We're a B Corp, which we're really proud of. We have a very high B Corp score of 150. B Corp is essentially, putting your money where your mouth is in terms of, being socially responsible, environmentally responsible, and having to, have metrics to show how you do that. We are also an employee-owned company. We're an ESOP, which we're also very proud of. And we, are 11-year running Angie Super Service Installer in Massachusetts. It's a really great group of people, because we're employee-owned, sort of everybody from, your designers to the electricians to the guys on the roof all have sort of a vested interest in an efficient job and a job well done because it's their company, it's our company.
Yeah, it's really nice to have that accountability. We're about 500 co-owners now between Maine, New Hampshire, and Massachusetts, of course. So this is obviously an overview. It says so. It's we're going to go through some solar basics. Real quick, has everyone heard of a B Corp? Did that land? Yeah, okay. Just wanted to see if anyone didn't know what that was.
I don't.
It's a movement in a way. They created a system of it's like being third-party audited for metrics having to do with ethical business practices, personnel practices, state sustainability metrics, and you check off boxes and you're scored based on those. On your essentially you're audited, I think, every 2 years, and you have to register. And we're just nipping at the heels of Patagonia, actually, and for a best in the world category, which means recycling programs, having clear policies, parental leave, the highest and lowest paid employees, things of that nature. So the B Corp stands for benefit. It's a benefit company. The idea that a company can exist in symbiosis with the community for the benefit of the workers, the surrounding community, and hopefully your industry as well. So, in a nutshell. So we'll check out some of the some things you may have heard of in your internet travels and conversations on tax credits, the renewable energy credits, the net metering policy that is really an engine that's what drives the financial viability of installing solar on your home, your condo, commercial property, what have you. We'll go through a case study that'll kind of break it out in real concrete terms and talk about financing briefly, and hopefully leave enough time for any questions that you might have.
So just a pretty high level kind of basics of the way solar works. The panels that we put on your roof are going to generate direct current DC. That gets sent to an inverter. It'll either be a microinverter, under the panel on your roof, or it'll go to a central inverter, elsewhere in the house, either outside or, in the basement at your main electrical panel. Those inverters change that electricity to alternating current. The electrons will sort of flow where they're easily where they're, most needed. So whatever is needed by your home at the time will get used in the house, and then whatever is excess will be exported to the grid through your electrical meter. So essentially, when you're, at nighttime when you're consuming your electricity, your meter is running like it normally would, counting up what kilowatt hours you're using. But when you're generating solar, you're generating more than what your house needs at that time. That is essentially having your meter spin backwards.
I know we said we have some Q&A on that, but does anyone have any like questions on some of that? It's basic, but at the same time, it's sometimes people have a query or there's something interesting or confusing about some of the basics of solar. No? Okay, cool. So there are a number of incentives and regulations that have made solar, I think, possible in the first place. There is still tenaciously remaining state federal tax credit. It's fluctuated slightly in the amount, but it's represented as a tax credit, an ITC, and it's a 30% tax credit, meaning that the cost of your system, you can take 30% of that total cost, so $20,000, $40,000, whatever it might be, and if you have the tax appetite for that, you can claim the 30% tax credit and figure that into your cash flow and the payback year and the ROI. And it's very important that solar is a financial engine that has traction that's going to work for you. Making clean energy is wonderful. A lot of people want to generate clean energy, and this doesn't sound very sales of me, and that's why I like working at Revision. It's not a commission-based door-knocking position. We're much more like consultants. Our grid is hopefully getting cleaner. We're adding more clean energy sources to the grid. So if your house isn't great for solar, if it isn't financially viable, it may not be the best move to do clean energy. There's community solar options. There's a lot of good stuff out there. There are alternatives. So to feel there's a burden on you to have to take a house that's maybe on the edge financially, in that wonderful spirit of like, I want to do right by the environment, that's so terrific, but I wouldn't want anyone to strain, so to speak. So it's important to work this stuff out. Massachusetts still gives $1,000. That's almost always how it works out, because it's up to $1,000 for this 15% tax credit. And finally, there's a small amount, it's not a royals ransom, but there's these renewable energy credits that you get paid for over a 25-year period. And it's a small fraction. There were prior incentives that were a lot more lucrative, but that it's worth mentioning because it's your first 5 years. If you have a $30,000 system, you might get back $4,000 or some such. So it's not insignificant. But Derek mentioned the net metering regulations that I think you described that pretty well. Anything to add about that? Or?
Well, I think the sort of basics of the net metering process is, we install the system at your house. Obviously we're getting electrical permits, building permits. Part of the process is also, applying to the utility, and this would be Eversource, saying here's our design. Here are one-line diagrams that we want to attach to your grid, and we have to get approval from the utility. Once the system is complete and it's been inspected, and the wiring inspector signs a certain form specific for Eversource, we will get permission to operate for the system. And once we have that, what the Eversource will come out and they'll take your existing meter where it's only measuring what's coming into your house. They'll swap that with a bi-directional meter, so that'll be measuring both what's coming in and what's going out. And the important part of this process is that during every billing cycle, what matters is what that number on your meter is at the end of the month. So maybe during the sunnier months, depending on your system size, you may generate more than what your home needs, and you end up with a negative billing. The number that they're billing you for would be a negative. That's created into a dollar amount, and you roll into the next month with a credit. It's not exactly 1-to-1, but it's fairly close. 90%-ish. It's distribution, transmission, and supply and generation. We're depending on the town. It's usually around 30%, 30 cents per kilowatt, 30 cents kilowatt hour for that excess. So depending on how the system is designed, you will roll into the winter months with a credit with Eversource that you slowly eat up when there's less sun, or if you have heat pumps, you're using more electricity in the wintertime to do heating and cooling. So that's generally, the way net metering is working, and how your sort of relationship of your solar array with the utility is functioning.
Yeah, if there's a power failure, even if you have solar and it's the next day and it's sunny, a lot of people don't know that you still won't have power. The system shuts off to protect line workers because it's would be exporting power onto the grid, so it's for safety reasons. You still do pay a customer charge to have the privilege of being connected to the grid. I think it's $7 or $10 a month, depending on whether or not you're in Eversource territory or National Grid territory. There are some designations, and this may or may not apply to you or someone that you know, depending on the size of their roof and its production potential. But there's this cutoff of 10 kilowatts, and that's AC. So this is after the conversion has been made at the roof level for its sort of direct current rating. What it actually generates in a given moment, if it's more than 10 kilowatts in alternating current, it's real production, then the billing cycle is, it's only 60% actually in terms of the net metering. I believe that you are designated as a qualifying facility, a QF. It's sort of utility company lingo, as it were. That's, I think, the minority of homes end up being that large. There is a really important asterisk that there's some legislation that is going to allow homeowners, that cap is going to be lifted so that it will be a 1-to-1 ratio, which is only logical, I think. I think that it exists because the utilities sort of want, well, why do you think it exists? Why do we have this? Why did we have this cap?
Well, I mean, the Massachusetts Department of Public Utilities, influences, they're essentially pressuring the utilities to have net metering. So to incentivize solar in Massachusetts, to help the state and cities and towns reach their sustainability goals and their carbon reduction goals. But obviously the utilities don't want to do this. It's not necessarily in their financial interest to have tons of solar. So there's always a bit of a battle to get the net metering, to be the way we want it to be, us in the solar industry and homeowners who have solar. 2 years ago, they passed a new rule saying systems 25 kW AC, up to 25 kW AC should get full net metering. While that law was passed, it hasn't been promulgated, hasn't sort of trickled down so that the utilities are actually enforcing it and doing that. We expect this to happen any day, but again, we've been waiting for 2 years. So we're having to do things in order to, get around that for systems that need to be larger. We have the expectation from the utilities that we can have 10 kW systems, systems larger than 10 kW that are going to be a qualifying facility can later become fully net metered as long as they're still below that 25 kW AC limit. That's maybe a little more in the weeds than we need tonight, but we'll also try to leave a lot of time for questions in case there are sort of specific questions to that. So, another incentive that Cal did mention earlier is the renewable energy credit. Years ago there were these SREC. There was the SREC program, SREC 1, SREC 2, which was frankly a really great financial incentive in Massachusetts. It was a pretty considerable amount over the life of the system, but it was declining block incentive. The more people signed up, the less amount you were getting. That's smart. But the SREC program there ended quite some time ago, maybe 8 years ago or 6.
I think 6.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then it was replaced by the SMART program. which was great in the beginning, but now is so low that we're not signing people up for it. What we're doing is these renewable energy credits. It's essentially a separate payment for generating renewable energy based on how much your system produces, and you're essentially creating a tradable commodity that utilities or companies that need to have a certain segment of their energy come from renewable sources sort of purchase. So an aggregator pools these all from individual homeowners and then sells them in larger blocks. But you never want to leave any money on the table. Depending on the size of the system, it's $250, $300 a year, and you usually do sign up with one of these aggregators in like a 5-year period and then renew after a certain time. But it's just another small incentive that makes a difference over the life of the system.
So here's a typical, what we would call an 8 kilowatt system. It's fairly, I would consider this fairly average at this point. You can physically fit the same amount of panels, but in the past this would have generated less power because the wattage rating of panels has gone up slowly over time. Just to give you some perspective, we're frequently installing 430 watt panels. When I got into solar in 2011 roughly, I think we were doing like
280.
280 was really exciting, 285s. And in that time we're at about 430, give or take right now. So waiting for the next panel iteration is usually the financial answer is it's better to just get solar now, and just in terms of the production and payback, because the amount of photon harvest that's lost, if you will, doesn't usually justify waiting for 5 watt per panel. In this slide you can see sort of an average consumption for a single family home hovers around 7,500 to 10,000 kilowatt hours per year. That goes up every year, no matter kind of who you are. I mean, if your kids, fly the coop as mine are just about to do, there's some ups and downs, but electrification is happening. Heat pumps, EVs, and induction cooktops making chocolate, which sounds really delicious and exciting. That's all increasing electricity. So, your system could offset 100% of what you consume. It can still potentially be a good deal, even if it's only 50% of your consumption. It's worth just running the numbers to see what the cash flow is. When does the system pay itself back? What's the ROI? And, just to get a sense, because it may still be an advantage. Obviously, the Shangri-La is if you can do 100%, and in many cases, some people have room to future-proof their house because they're going to get heat pumps or EVs, and they'll try to rack up a system that'll cover 150% of their current historical usage over the last year. Typical proposals will show you a year. You'll plug in a year's worth of your electric bill, and you'll see kind of how it works out. And there's the cost breakdown there with the federal tax credit, the state tax credit, and all of this, including the 25-year renewable energy credit revenue, which is an estimate. The first 5 years of those that REC income is fixed at 0.031 cents per watt. And then it's average 0.028 cents, right? So this isn't a market that fluctuates a lot. So this is a fair estimate of what that 25-year take is. And again, it's small. It's not anything ginormous, but it's worth mentioning.
And so, for that same 8 kilowatt system, just some of the, benefits that you might see, over that 25-year period, you are producing electricity that, if it was, coming from, other sources rather than being generated on your house, represents saving 125 metric tons of CO2. The panels that are being installed, will have a 25 to 40 year power output warranty. It's essentially referring to, the the percentage that the panel sort of, how much less it produces over time. The cells degrade. It's usually around a percentage a year. Although I think in practice with the newer panels, it has proven to be less than that. But just in terms of I have had a system on my house since 2015, and I can't see a reduction in production based on that, based on the sort of natural panel degradation. I can't tell the difference between that and just weather patterns, just having a less than sunny June that you might normally have. So I kind of yet to really perceive that reduction over time.
Yeah.
And typically in Massachusetts, you're getting payback of anywhere from 6 to 10 years. Really, that depends on, what your roof is like, what the pitch is, how it faces the sun, how many trees you have. That's certainly a big issue in sort of, older communities like Newton. We have a lot of mature trees around. My experience, that is kind of the largest impact on a system production is trees adjacent to homes, and not every home is advisable. Sometimes we're going to tell people that their money's better spent on air sealing and insulating than putting a solar array on their house if they have giant trees everywhere surrounding the roof. But again, we've definitely 6 to 10 years, and then after that, you're essentially making money in the respect that this would have been money that's going out to the utility that you can that you're keeping in your pocket. Internal rate of return 10 to 15%, and a 25-year life cycle savings of 40,000. That seems low to me. I think it's really higher than that over that 25-year. But that's this model. I don't know what the details of this model was, but I think it's higher.
I agree. I'm seeing some five-year paybacks and some higher ones. We have a couple of slides on finances. I want to check how we're doing.
I think we want to kind of keep it going. We want to make sure we leave enough time for questions. We don't want to just talk at you. We want to make sure,
Can go over split through the slides so people have questions about it.
That's great.
Just so they see the topics.
We work with a couple of lenders, UMass 5 and the Clean Energy Credit Union. So for us at Sunbud Revision, it's important to work with institutions that have a good track record and are stable. They're going to be around. I don't know if these interest rates are current because, as we've all heard,
I think they might have come down in the last few weeks in terms of the rate reductions that everybody's seeing. But if people have specific questions about the solar loan about any of the loan programs, we're happy to answer more detailed questions, but we want to make sure we have Rachel enough time to do her thing. But thank you, everyone, and we'll answer your questions as they come.
Great, thank you so much. Rachel.
Thank you. That was really informative and interesting. I'm happy to be here sharing the stage with you tonight. As Judy said, I'm Rachel White. I'm the CEO of Byggmeister Design Build. We are also an employee-owned company, much smaller, 15 employees. We've been in Newton for 41 years, and the focus, or our niche, if you will, of our projects is we do renovation and retrofit work. So what does that mean? It means we focus on improving existing homes, doing projects where we're making functionality and livability improvements at the same time that we are also improving efficiency and comfort, reducing energy use, and carbon emissions. So I'm going to be talking to you tonight about how we think about home energy planning, sort of putting all the pieces together. All of our projects include energy planning, some very explicitly, that's what homeowners are coming to us asking for, but always implicitly thinking about what we can do as part of our projects that we're working on to improve energy performance. So home energy performance is a three-legged stool, or a three-step path. The three key components are improving efficiency. So that is reducing the demand of your home for primarily heating energy, but to some extent cooling energy. The second step is, and these don't necessarily, as I'll say, happen in this order, but is electrifying sort of everything, replacing all of your fossil-based systems with electric systems. for heating, for hot water, for cooking, for dryer, if you still have a gas dryer. And then not going to talk a lot tonight about solar because it was covered. But if you, as you mentioned, if your house is not a good candidate for solar, there are other options. Certainly the starting point is opting up to 100% green through Newton Power Choice, but there's community solar. So every existing house is different, right? So there is no one size fits all home energy plan. It depends on the age, the condition of your major systems, such as your roof or your mechanical equipment, depends on your home's architectural style, other needs and plans you have for your home, how long you're planning to be in your home, and your budget. So I can't sit here and tell you, here's the plan, go and implement it. That said, there are, I think in our experience, there are some common elements to a good energy plan, and so that's what I'm going to focus on here, sort of what I see as the 5 key elements to a good home energy plan. So the first is that a good home energy plan is going to assess and then address any existing hazards or contaminants you have in your home. Now not all of these on this list are necessarily sort of urgent, kind of immediate life safety issues that you need to address, but they're things that you should know about and some things that you may want to address prior to doing certain energy improvements. Some of the common ones I've included on this slide that we encounter in our projects are knob and tube wiring. That's a barrier for weatherization work. If you have a mass save assessment and you have knob and tube wiring, you're going to have to remove that first before you move forward. Another one that is not typically, I guess, tested as part of the mass save assessment is radon. We test for radon on all of our projects. Another common one is asbestos. The slide here shows a photo of what's known as friable asbestos. This is asbestos that's starting to crumble on piped insulation for heating pipes. So if you're replacing, as this project shows a photo of we're going to be replacing the steam system, so we're going to be hiring like a specialized asbestos abatement contractor to remove that asbestos pipe insulation properly. And so it's good to know about these things, to know what's present. I've listed some other things I thought on the way over here. I should have put lead on here. That's another one to think about when you're doing a renovation or a retrofit project. So that's number 1. Number 2, and this is a general guideline, but I wouldn't call it dogma, but if you haven't done anything, right, you really, at the very beginning, you typically want to start with efficiency. And there's sort of several reasons to start with efficiency, but in general, the more you can reduce your home's demand for energy, the less energy you're going to use, the less you're going to spend on energy. It's going to help you out when it is time to electrify. You can install sort of a right-sized equipment for your home rather than a larger system than you would need if you hadn't done the efficiency work. You're going to be more comfortable. This is, I'd say, getting maybe beyond the scope of this talk, but there's also a grid citizenship component to this as we think about there's sort of a massive build-out of utility-scale solar and wind that's going to be required for us to electrify everything. The more that we can reduce the demand for energy, we're going to be hopefully cutting into what's required for that build out. So it's really, but again, that's sort of beyond the scope of your particular home, but it's something that we think about a lot, is sort of we need to balance the investments that we're making in load reduction with what we're doing to build out the grid to meet all of those new electric loads. Okay, so if you haven't had, how many people here have had a mass save assessment? Okay, everybody here, so I'm preaching to the choir. If you haven't, if it's been a while, it's can be good to get another one because some of the aspects of the program are evolving. But really, starting with efficiency means sort of addressing what I think of as like the low-hanging fruit, the reasonably accessible weak spots in your building envelope, typically at the top and the bottom of the house. A lot of weatherization I don't know how many weatherization contractors use a blower door to quality control their work, but that is a key. If you have the opportunity, hire an air sealing and insulation contractor that's going to use a blower door to quality control their work in improving the air barrier. It's also important to know that there are times for your particular home and your particular needs where you may want to do more or something different than what Mass Save incentivizes in terms of the efficiency work. The two that are most common in our projects are at the top of the house. Mass Save incentivizes putting the air barrier and the thermal boundary at your attic floor, so air sealing and insulating at the attic floor. But if you're going to be installing a ducted heat pump, or even just using your attic for storage, it makes a lot more sense to move the thermal boundary to the underside of the roof. And that's what I'm showing here. And that would be, I don't know which side that is, your left or your right, but whatever. And another example is, so Mass Save covers air sealing the rim joist of your basement. But we often find in our projects that it makes sense to take that all the way down the basement walls. And that's not work. It gets often because you're also putting mechanical equipment in there. It also helps the spray foam insulation is vapor impermeable. So if you're trying to sort of address moisture issues in your basement, it really helps contribute to a drier, not just sort of thermal control, but also vapor control. So there are things, start with Mass Save, but don't necessarily end there. Oh, yes.
I think one thing just to make really clear is you're saying we want to have our mechanical equipment inside the conditioned space of our home.
Yes.
Not outside of the
Did
conditioned
everybody
space
hear
of our
that?
home.
I'll repeat it. You want your mechanical equipment to be within the thermal boundary of your home rather than outside. And so that's why, if, for example, if you're going to be putting an air handler and a ducted heat pump in your attic, you want to move, if the insulation is at the attic floor, you want to take that and move it up to the roof. Bring the equipment indoors. Thank you.
And the reason for that?
Efficiency.
Efficient. So it, if it's at the same, close to the same temperature that you're trying to maintain in your house, it's
Yeah.
going to work a lot better.
Yeah.
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 Okay. How do you know when it's time to move on? You know it's time to move on when taking the next steps would be really disruptive or really costly. Taking down, removing finishes, doing demolition to make significant improvements, or throwing out materials that still have reasonable life left in them. You also know when it's time to move on, I'd say, if you have that sort of near end of life equipment upgrade that you need to do. Ideally you've done Mass Save weatherization, but if there's sort of that you've got this significant investment you need to make in equipment, don't think that you have to go as far as you possibly can with efficiency before making that. You don't want to install another gas equipment, a gas boiler or gas furnace, just because you haven't done everything you can to improve efficiency. You don't want to lock yourself in for another generation to a fossil fuel system. So that's another time when I'd say it's time to move on. Okay, third component of a element of a good home energy plan is that it prepares to electrify before you're facing a crisis or emergency replacement where you have to go with a like for like, right? Where you're stuck installing another gas boiler, another gas furnace, another gas water heater because you haven't planned ahead. This is very basic, but having your equipment serviced annually, asking the service provider, how's it doing? How much life does it have left? Should I start thinking about a replacement is always a good idea. And I would say, start talking to heat pump installers, and I'm really focused on heating, but it's also true with hot water heaters. Start talking to people a year or two before you think you're there. Start figuring out what your plan is. Similarly with your electric service. If your house only has 100 amps going to it, you're almost certainly, to meet all the new, almost certainly is sort of an understatement, you're going to need to upgrade your electric service. You could possibly get away, do a smart panel. Those aren't really widely used yet, but I would say 100 amp service. Do you agree with that? Upgrade to 200?
Yes.
Yeah, upgrade
Especially
to 200.
people doing car chargers, et cetera.
Correct. So the wait time for that equipment can be really long. We have people who've been waiting a year to upgrade their service. So that's another one to, get your electrician. We typically, if you have 200 amps, that's typically good. We have some larger homes that need to upgrade to 400, but that's pretty unusual for the projects that we do. So that's another one to prepare. Related to this, for some, oh, yes.
Sorry,
I'm talking really fast, I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. I just think I missed it. So, like, for instance, I have a condo. I don't have a single said something about upgrading you.
So get your-
Which had not crossed my mind.
Yeah, well, it actually, that can be a stumbling block for people that keeps them. So I would say if you have an electrician, talk to your electrician, get them to come and take a look at the service that you have. If they think that they need to do an electric load calculation to tell them what you're planning to move ahead with, have them do that. If you don't, have an electrician, ask one of your neighbors. But yeah, that is definitely something that if you're thinking, as you're thinking of preparing to electrify, and an EV is another good example we haven't talked about, that you want to make sure your service can accommodate that.
So that's maybe step one. Okay.
Yeah, I
did
would-
not know that. Thank you.
Yeah.
That's
And-
Yes,
Is that coming from the street to the house?
That's
That
correct.
gets changed, right?
yes, that's correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
So some digging involved?
Can
Or-
be, yeah.
Or if some of them are overhead, maybe?
Can be, yes.
Yeah.
Okay. There are some homes where, when you're thinking about electrifying, a phased approach to heat pump conversions makes sense. There are pros and cons to this. I've included a few projects here where we have done phased or partial heat pump conversions. The two in the smaller picture, we did ductless heat pumps to serve the main living spaces on the first floor as part of a project, and the larger, the Victorian, we did a ducted heat pump in the attic to serve the bedrooms. And so when would you consider sort of a partial heat pump conversion? Tight budget. You have multiple differently aged systems, right? You don't just have like one heating system. You've got, maybe two heating systems. You've got a central air system. You sort of you may want to, as one of those gets to the end of life, you may want to change that out for a heat pump for whatever portion of the house it serves and allow the other systems to stay in place. The downsides are the incentive from Mass Save is less generous. There's still a per ton incentive for the heat pump, but it's not equivalent to what you would get if, the whole house heat pump incentive is $10,000. And so if you do a partial system, you're not, even if it's serving half the house, you're not going to get $5,000 most likely. The other thing to think about sometimes with partial heat pump installations is you need to make sure it's sized to meet the load, the entire heating load of the space that it's installed in. So sometimes heat pumps are installed primarily for air conditioning or for heating, but there's assumption that there's going to be a fossil backup. Right, so if you're, as part of a phased electrification, you want to make sure that anything that you do install can meet the entire heating load of that space where it's serving, that it doesn't require any backup heat. Okay. Prioritize and sequencing. The order you do things in matters. It ensures that you can meet your performance expectations. It's the most cost-effective. And it also helps you avoid problems. I just included this project, project we did in 2022, because I just thought it was a really excellent example of a well-sequenced project, thanks to the homeowners. It's a two-family home. Our clients live on the second and third floors in the upper unit. Their parents live on the first floor. In like 2 years before they'd been in the house, maybe 5 years, 2 years before they came to us, they installed ductless heat pumps throughout their unit. They came to us, they wanted to renovate their third floor just to make it sort of more comfortable sleeping space, and also install solar. But because they had already done the ductless heat pumps, we were able to take down the chimney that was no longer needed for the oil boiler that they have. So the fact that they sort of did that first allowed us to take down the chimney. The roof itself didn't need to be replaced because it had been replaced a couple of years before they moved in. But because we were gutting the entire third floor, we were also able to sort of prepare the structure for the solar. And that was just, them thinking ahead about the sort of the order that they were doing things in allowed us to just achieve sort of optimal results. Sometimes you do things out of order. It's not the worst thing in the world. Then you go back and fix it. We do a lot of that in our work. This particular project, it's not a great photo, was a twofold kitchen and mudroom renovation. Also, a key complaint was they had installed a ducted heat pump in their attic. That's what that's showing, above the thermal boundary. And they were they were cold, and they were continuing to have to use their oil system way more than they anticipated. So as part of our work, this is sort of a multiple attic spaces. We disconnected the ducted heat pump. We insulated at the roof line, the area of the roof where the air handler was installed. We also tested the ducts. The heat pump installer reused existing ductwork from a conventional air conditioning system that had been there before. We were able to save some of that, but we had to change, a bunch of it in order to make the system work properly. This is going to be the first year that this is done, that we've done this work, that they're going to get through the winter, and fingers crossed that they don't have to, that they're really able to not use the oil at all or very, very minimally. Again, not the worst thing in the world, but it definitely, added hassle and cost for them to have this installation and then have us have to go back, disconnect it, make these fixes, and put it back together. And no diss to the heat pump installer that did this. You're working with existing constraints in existing homes, and it's a judgment call. How much ductwork do you save? How much do you get rid of and change? And people have tight budgets, and you have to figure out how to work with them. So there's no perfect system. And again, not worst thing in the world, but if you can do things in the right order, it's great. Oh, did I skip it?
Yeah.
Okay, last, near and dearest to my heart is every renovation project is an opportunity to improve performance. If you're going to renovate your kitchen, take an opportunity to say, okay, what else can I do to make my house more efficient? Maybe my equipment is not at end of life, but what should I be thinking about that I'm going to need to do 2 years from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now? And so use that as an opportunity. And one that we're excited about, which is sort of newer to us, is a game changer for air sealing, which is a product called Aero Barrier that we used at this project that we're actually just finishing up now. So what is Aero Barrier? It is an acrylic sealant that's been used for many years in duct sealing. So it's applied as sort of an aerosol that fills the cracks and the gaps, and it's now being used not just for sealing ducts, but for sealing sort of entire homes, whole home air sealing. Used first in new construction, but it's being used now in retrofit applications. The house needs to be entirely empty. You need to move everything out of the house. So if you're considering a whole home renovation, this is for you.
Or painstakingly covered up.
Or painstakingly covered up, or if you're moving, this is something that should really be part of when homes change hands and people move out of homes. I'd see potential here. You need to do sort of your conventional blower door guided air sealing first. Aero Barrier is not for like big holes in the building envelope. It's for the last few tiny cracks and gaps that you can't get with tape and caulk and with cans of spray foam, right? So what you do is you have to cover all horizontal surfaces with plastic. So one downside is it generates a lot of waste. You also have to cover up any openings like windows and doors that you don't want to seal shut. You pressurize the house with the Aero Barrier sort of machine running, and the aerosol sort of finds the cracks, accumulates, and seals them. And the results are really extraordinary. For folks who want to know about sort of indoor air quality, it is Green Guard Gold certified, which is a very reputable. I don't need to go into the details about what Green Guard Gold is, but it does have that certification. Really extraordinary results. So this house started out pretty leaky, not the leakiest we've seen, so 13 ACH, which stands for air changes per hour, at a 50 Pascal pressure differential, which is just this standard we use for measuring air tightness for homes. We've seen homes that are leakier, that more complex geometry, homes that are larger, older than this house, around 20. With our sort of conventional, sort of standard envelope improvement measures that we do on all of our projects, we were able to cut that more than in half to 6 air changes per hour. But then with the Aero Barrier, we got it to 1.5 air changes per hour, which is twice as good as the code for new construction. It's not best in class. Best in class is Passive House, which is 0.6 air changes per hour, but it's pretty good for an existing home. And so this is not going to be something that, you know, every home is a good candidate for, because most homes are being worked on and people are living in the homes. They're not doing a full gut renovation, but absolutely when there's gut renovation or when a house is changing hands, it's a really good tool that I'm really excited about. Okay, all right, final thoughts. This one I sort of have to read because I don't remember what I wrote. Okay, take advantage of mass save, but don't let the incentives dictate what you do. Start with efficiency, but don't get stuck there. Make sure you're on top of the age and condition of your systems so that you are prepared before something fails. Be thoughtful about the order. And if you're renovating your home, seize the opportunities that present themselves to make performance improvements. And we'll stop there and take more questions.
Great. Well, thank you
Oh.
to all of you. That was really appreciate a ton of information. Now it's time for all of your questions. Do you have questions?
I have one. We are renovating our homes, two-family, so I have tons of questions, but one of them is,
I'll also stick around after if you want to
Okay.
ask more
Yeah.
questions. Yeah, I think we all will, so.
yeah, and considering solar possibly too, but one is on the heat pump HVAC system. We've had a bunch of different companies come in and give proposals, and we're still not clear, like, for winter, cold winters, how well with our currently leaky house, which maybe we could improve it substantially, you know, do we need to have a dual fuel system, like a gas backup heat when it gets cold winter days?
So that's a great question and a very common question. We are finding with our projects that we are typically, almost always I would say, able to do enough to improve efficiency that we really don't need to worry about backup.
Mm-hmm.
Some homeowners want backup anyway, even when we assure them that we can meet the entirety of their heating load with a heat pump. The key, though, is to have the load calculations done, to really know what the load of the house is,
Mm-hmm.
and to size the system to meet that load, and to make sure you've got the distribution in all the spaces that you need it.
Okay.
So I tend towards, you don't need the backup. Like, we can figure out a way to do without the backup. But I know that other people feel differently, and I'm guessing you've had multiple opinions
Yeah.
from the different installers who you've spoken to.
Right.
So,
Yeah, okay.
And I mean, I guess it gets complicated, and you can correct me if I'm wrong about some of this, but, you know, in terms of right-sizing that heat pump equipment, like, there's a risk to oversizing in the respect that, you know, if you're designing for the coldest day, you know, a lot of the time, the rest of the winter, your system's gonna be what's called short cycling, and it's
Yeah.
gonna end up using a lot more electricity than it should.
Yeah.
So, you know, I mean, we electrified our house in Somerville in 2015, went all electric, and while, you know, we didn't go Byggmeister as far as we should have in like our basement, you know, so we're not, you know, our first floor is not as warm as we'd like on the coldest days,
Mm-hmm.
but the rest of the house is great.
Right.
So we just need to do more work on our basement, and then we'll probably be great, so.
Okay, thanks.
yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, I just want to say that there are always judgment calls involved.
Mhm. Right.
And so, you know, we've had this conversation, you know, on the design day, you know, the coldest, 90% coldest day of the year, you know, what's the temperature going to be? And are you going to upsize the equipment in order to meet that? Or are you going to think, you know, sometimes a little bit of electric resistance is a back. I would say
Right,
I would tend to do that first before I did the dual fuel. But again,
right.
you're going to get multiple opinions, sometimes from the same person. So in any event,
Yeah.
another question.
There.
I was just gonna say, if you're thinking of solar, a lot of people ask if you should have the solar company do a service upgrade to the 200 amps if you're thinking of doing it. Actually, maybe not. It's like asking, we're specialists, so it's like asking a cardiologist to do a physical.
Okay.
So it's your trusted local electrician has less overhead, and it's gonna be a much better deal to do that ahead of time with them than having someone like us do it.
Interesting. Thanks.
I'm sorry.
Okay, that aerial barrier, so if you seal the home too tight, wouldn't you have to also install a ventilation system if you're putting?
Man, you guys are well educated, huh? That's a great that's a great question. For time, I cut out the slide that sort of talked about all the mechanical work that we did at this house, but absolutely, we installed an energy recovery ventilation system. So that's balanced ventilation, where the amount of fresh air that's coming in is balanced with the air that's being exhausted. So yes, absolutely, you want to do that. Remember, this was a major renovation, and so taking that step made a lot of sense. On our projects, do people try to want to value engineer the ERVs out, the energy recovery ventilations that we propose? Yeah, I mean it's again, some people. Most of the homes we're working on, we're not getting as tight as this house. That said, exhaust ventilation, exhaust-only ventilation isn't a great strategy for ventilation, even in homes that are still relatively leaky. You can still, in closed doors of bedrooms overnight, your air can still get pretty stale. But yeah, absolutely, you're absolutely right. You do need to install balanced ventilation for that, and we did.
Okay, and then is it possible to do that just in the attic, the aerial barrier,
Yes.
for a house that's still occupied?
Oh. I don't know that would make sense. I need to think about that one a little bit more.
Because it sounds easier than putting the insulation on the roof.
Okay, so yes, it is much easier than taking off your siding and your roofing and super insulating and then establishing a continuous air barrier outboard of that new insulation. And we can talk afterwards. I think if you're doing your attic, just do a really good job with blower door guided air sealing. I'm not sure how you would. I need to think about that more, but that doesn't sound like a great idea to me. But
Just along those lines, what about for a two-family home? If our unit on the second, third floor will be pretty much vacating it, but the first floor won't.
why don't you follow up with me, and I'll get my colleague
Sure.
who I have not been involved in a project that has done this yet, so I'm even talking about a project that I did not work on, and somebody else might, but I'm just really excited about it. So I'll put you in touch with him, and you can ask those questions.
Great.
Right, or he can put you in touch with the person we worked with to do the air barrier installation.
A couple of quick questions about solar. One is, if something goes wrong with the system, who works on it? I don't know if it's easy.
That's a really important question. Most panel manufacturers and the other equipment, like your microinverters under each panel or the central inverter, there's a couple of ways to do that, have warranties, 25, 30 years and some such. It's like if your oven breaks, you get a new oven, but you still often have to pay the labor to do that. But theoretically, the solar installer themselves should have a robust workmanship warranty. Typically it's 10 years, and that should mean that they own all the penetrations that have been made in the roof, the conduits, whether it's internal or external, where the wires have been pulled through, where everything lands in the breaker in your main service panel. All of that work should be owned by the installer. It's important to ask a prospective solar company if they really have a set-aside service department, because if they're peeling their personnel off of their everyday, profit-making business, we get calls actually every day from folks who, say, I've called my solar company, they won't get back to me, or they're dragging their feet.
Orphaned systems where the company doesn't exist anymore, and there's
Yeah.
no one to service it anymore. But the answer is the solar company. You would call them and they would fix it, and, you know,
They should.
probably for the first 10 years, there would be no charge, and then after 10 years, there might be whatever sort of truck roll or labor involved with replacing that warranted item.
Okay, and then another question I had is, if we are thinking about solar, we've heard a little bit about battery storage. Is that something that ideally is installed when you install the panels themselves? Is that something that can be done just as easily retroactively?
It depends on the house, and it depends on the other work that you're doing at that time, how easily it is to sort of do it at different times. You know, it's probably more economical to do them both at the same time. You know, but it's also important to understand and make sure that you're getting the right information from, you know, your installer about, you know, what these are capable of, why you're installing batteries in the first place. You know, typically in Massachusetts, we're installing batteries for people that want them for backup. That is, you know, for backing up their systems. But once you start electrifying your home, there are limits to what a battery can do. It's not the same as, you know, a gas-fired or propane-fired generator. You know, there's a limited number of kilowatt hours, and depending on the size of your home and your heat pump system, you know, we may not be able to back up a whole house heat pump system with a battery, or you can, but if your power goes out in the middle of the night, you're going to wake up to a possibly drained battery. So, you know, that's sort of in my new construction projects, it's something I come up against constantly, is people thinking, oh, I'm going to put solar and then get a battery and run my whole house. But that's, you know, it's not as always easy to do that.
And for older homes, siting is important. Where it can go, it's a question to ask. You know, there are some outdoor rated batteries now. Tesla has the Powerwall 3, you can mount that outside. If it's inside, sometimes code requires something of a bomb shelter to be made, and that's this whole extra cost. It is sometimes an absolute deal killer because it doubles the cost of the expenditures.
The safest assumption is that there's a garage with a side wall, not where you're parked straight in, but on a side wall. That is least likely to have pushback from the local inspectors, as opposed to putting it in the basement or in the house. There, you know, some towns, even though technically code-wise we can put them in a basement, but, you know, town like Concord just won't allow it.
Great. Maybe one more question, and then they've offered to stay after, so that sounds good.
Anybody else want to go?
Your question.
Okay, I'll take the question. Okay, in your modeling of the cost and benefit for the solar, did you include the maintenance over that period?
Yeah, typically that's not part of that model. But you know, maintenance is, you know, there really isn't that much maintenance. I mean, maintenance in the respect that, you know, we depend on the homeowner to monitor the system and let us know if something goes wrong. But, you know, what you're most likely to see is, you know, is replacing an inverter or replacing a microinverter. The panels themselves, I mean, unless there's some, like, you know, unprecedented, you know, hailstorm or snowstorm or something, you know, you tend to find an issue with a panel when we're installing or when they're being tested out of the box. The panels themselves don't necessarily fail, but you know, you'll have to replace a microinverter or an inverter at some point, but it's not a huge cost, you know, depends on.
It's a good question to ask, because we cover bumper to bumper, like even the truck roll for 10 years showing up, you know, like that oven scenario where you pay the labor to replace the oven even though you get a free oven or a panel. Our 10-year workmanship warranty actually includes that stuff, showing up, doing diagnostic stuff, lifting the panel, changing the microinverter. But that's not always the case, so you just want to drill into the fine print of any warranties and workmanship stuff and so on.
So, and then the warranty seems to be longer than a typical roof.
I said,
So
yeah.
then,
Yeah.
so what happens?
Well,
Replace the roof and-
you know, we're certainly recommending people replace their roof, you know, if they think, you know, if you're gonna have to replace a roof within the next, like, I don't know, 8 years, you know, or you know, 5 years, 8 years, you're always better off. You never want to go into installing a solar array with the assumption, I'm going to take it off, fix the roof, and put it back on. that's
But at
that's
some point-
very expensive process. You don't want to do that.
But at some point, the roof might need to be replaced before the solar, so have you had to deal with that yet?
I mean, we're starting to see that more and more, not necessarily with, our systems, but, systems where people are having to take them down and put them back up, and that's definitely an expensive process, so.
We
If
do
you-
have a cutoff at 15-year-old roof, because the
Yeah.
thing that's damaging roofs are the UV rays. And when I was on the roof doing installs, older shingles, they get a little more brittle. They may look beautiful, but when you try to make those penetrations into the rafters to lag down the rail system, the hole that it makes is a little crumbly, and so at about the 15 years of being exposed to UV, we can't feel comfortable for us at Sunbug Revision owning those penetrations. So it's a rough cutoff date. Every roof is a little bit different. That makes it real awkward when it's like 13 years and like, do I replace the roof? Sometimes you can just replace the plane of the roof that's going solar and wait on the other ones. So there's more than one way to feed a cat in this kind of a situation.
Okay, and it also sounds like if you're going solar, you should vet the company and make sure they're going to be around as long as
That's
you're going to have your house. Right?
Yeah, and we just did a blog post on that because the NPR article came out a couple of weeks ago about the deservedly horrid reputation that rooftop solar has developed for itself. I've been watching it like a slow motion train wreck for a decade and plus, and we have a piece on how to avoid shady practices, solar puns. But it's pretty comprehensive. We tried to hit all the high notes on just like how to immunize yourself against poor practices and recognize that stuff. Sometimes it's not always intuitive to know what to look for.
Hiring a B Corp is a good.
It's one good indicator because it takes an amount of work and institutional effort to bother to do all those things and to reveal your accounting stuff, and it's a good indicator.
So thank you so much for sharing all of your knowledge and taking time on Wednesday evening for coming in to help us understand a little bit more how we can make our homes more sustainable. And thank you for coming. They have generously offered to stay after, so we can just thank them now. And, thank you.
Thank you very much.